Banks are struggling. Commercial real estate is struggling. Where commercial real estate is struggling, the banks that are local, regional, and super regional banks that are the largest lenders to commercial real estate, they're struggling. All of this comes back to your deposits being stable and what they're getting paid or what you're getting paid on your deposits. So basically, the Federal Reserve, President Trump, and financial institutions themselves all want rates to come down. It's a dual mandate that the Federal Reserve has to make sure that inflation doesn't shoot through the roof and stay stable, while making sure that monetary policy is not so restrictive that massive layoffs come into play because economic activity is compressed so much by higher interest rates. So if concerns about FDIC insurance and bail-ins wasn't enough, now your deposits are at risk of getting much less return in the foreseeable future. We need to discuss Trump's policy to pull interest rates down, how his connection to the Federal Reserve, his ability to get that policy put in place when interest rates are brought down, the connection between the federal funds rate and your deposit rates, and as well as what your alternatives are, the timelines on this happening. We have a lot to discuss in this video when it comes to your savings and the earnings that they're getting. CDs, high yield savings accounts, are they still going to be worth it? And what are your alternatives if not? This is JP from Blueprint for Prosperity Network. I'm providing you the information you need to master your banking relationships as well as maximizing your borrowing capacity so you can customize your blueprint for prosperity. So when it comes to interest rates, President Trump has made it abundantly clear that he's not been a fan of how the Federal Reserve has handled things, and he is not a fan of the interest rate policy that has been put in place, or the monetary policy that's been put in place that has raised interest rates and kept those rates high at this time. Now, it's been a little bit of a circus act with President Trump kind of going at Jerome Powell and kind of demanding or trying to bully his way into getting interest rates dropped. Federal Chair Powell's kind of kept his composure and made it clear that they are independent of the government, apolitical, and are not subject to the powers of the president when it comes to monetary policy. Now, the Federal Reserve's Fed fund rate is basically the initial rate that sets the rates, for the most part, for the rest of the money distributed out in the system. Banks are basically, the Federal Reserve is going to be the one pumping money into the system. Banks are going to them basically as the wholesaler of money. So the Federal Reserve may say, our rate is 3%. Banks are going to pay that 3% on that money to get their hands on it. And then as the retailer, if you will, are going to go back and lend that money out into the marketplace where they're going to put their own spread and premium on top of it. In the midst of that, that rate that the bank has to pay is going to influence the rate they're going to pay you on your deposits, to put it all in plain English. So basically, Trump wanting the Federal Reserve to drop interest rates, meaning that he wants them to lower the rate that they charge banks, so banks can charge lower interest rates in the economy when they're lending their money out, making it easier and cheaper for businesses and consumers to borrow money, which leads to them borrowing more money and putting more money in circulation, which heats up the economy. That's President Trump's goal. In the meantime of doing that, when the Federal Reserve lowers their rates, the banks get to lower the rates that they're paying on your deposits in the process. So amidst a video that I just released not long ago, explaining the potential concerns or risk, if any, on FDIC insurance, the potential of bail-ins, which you can catch that video somewhere linked on the screen or in the description, where I shot and talked about what bail-ins are and how they can put your deposits at risk. Your savings could also be at risk on a more front-end basis on its returns. Interest rates coming down is something President Trump is adamant about. And believe it or not, the Federal Reserve, even though they seem to be at odds with President Trump, or at least trying to hold firm against him, they, prior to him even getting in office, had projected in their SEP, their standard economics projections, that they wanted to cut interest rates this year and the next 3 or 4 years subsequently after. The Federal Reserve had already planned to cut interest rates. So President Trump coming in and demanding interest rates to be cut, yes, they're trying to hold fast and not look like they're succumbing to the authority of the president because they're supposed to be apolitical. But that having been said, they already want interest rates cut. On top of that, banks want interest rates cut. Banks were struggling with higher interest rates. It's gone under the radar now, but at the time of this recording, about 2 years ago in early 2023, we had 2 significant bank failures. In First Republic, Silvergate Bank, excuse me for drawing a blank on that, but it will be on the screen. We had 2 bank collapses in 2023, largely connected to higher interest rates. Banks are struggling. Commercial real estate is struggling. And with commercial real estate struggling, the banks that are local, regional, and super regional banks that are the largest lenders to commercial real estate, they're struggling. All of this comes back to your deposits being stable and what they're getting paid, or what you're getting paid on your deposits. So basically, the Federal Reserve, President Trump and financial institutions themselves all want rates to come down. That having been said, the monetary policy is balanced by price stability and maximum employment. It's a dual mandate that the Federal Reserve has to make sure that inflation doesn't shoot through the roof and stays stable, while making sure that interest rates or monetary policy is not so restrictive that massive layoffs come into play because economic activity is compressed so much by higher interest rates. When it's compressed, companies are making less money is flowing through the system. They lay people off to cut their costs. So the Federal Reserve has a massive balancing act. President Trump is demanding rates to come down to stimulate economic activity. This is gonna put your deposits at risk when it comes to their earnings. So your alternatives are to invest. It's a risk-on environment. If that starts to happen, which already started in fourth quarter of 2024, prior to President Trump getting into office and right after him getting elected, the Federal Reserve started dropping interest rates. Once he officially got in and we got closer to inauguration, they paused all rate cuts. So they basically were saying, hey, inflation has been a little sticky. It's not down to our 2% target. It's been a little resistant. And President Trump comes right out of the gate on his election, promising a lot of policy changes that could all be inflationary, or many could be inflationary. Examples like tariffs, wanting interest rates down, deregulation, and more. He wants to heat the economy up. Rates coming down, inflation not being at a stable point, this can lead to a skyrocketing of already risky levels of inflation. The Federal Reserve is looking at this saying, well, until we see these policies come into place, he wants tax cuts, he wants tariffs, he wants deregulation. These are all potentially inflationary, as well as all reducing the amount of revenue the government brings in. You're cutting agencies, you're cutting taxes. The government's going to be reducing its income. Then you're trying to put out tariffs, which can lead to an influx in cost of goods and services coming into the United States. This is all leaving the Federal Reserve in a tough spot where they know interest rates need to come down to keep economic activity at a healthy level and not start to increase unemployment, and to keep the pressure off of banks on the back end. They're not saying this, but at the end of the day, they know there's a lot of pressure on banks. Mid to regional and mid-sized financial institutions and small local financial institutions are under a lot of duress with higher interest rates. Your money is stuck in the middle of all these moving parts. Your deposits are stuck in the middle of all of these moving parts. The Federal Reserve is in a situation eventually where they are likely going to have to pull rates down. And when they do so, as you've already seen from the fourth quarter rate cuts, your deposit rates will come down with it. CDs, high yield savings accounts will not be paying the same. They're already not paying the same. 4.5%, 5% was very realistic up into the fourth quarter and prior, 2023, 2024, 4.5%, 5% on your high yield savings accounts and CDs was very realistic. Right now, it's a fight to get 4. So that is going to continue. Your savings is at risk. Savers get punished when the economic wheel starts to turn faster. When money is moving more through the economy, rates are low, borrowing is up, and that basically creates a risk-on environment. Assets inflate, deposit rates are brought down and paid less. Interest rates and inflation is usually a little higher. That basically means that you are usually getting at or less of a earnings on your deposits than inflation. It also means against other goods, services, and assets that your savings is not going to keep up with that. The earnings on your savings is not going to keep up with that. Savers get punished in most economic systems. They get punished in most economic cycles. Basically, what we've been in from late 2022 to most of 2024, all the way through to 2024, that 2 or so year window of time, even right now, interest rates being higher or earnings being higher on your deposits than what the official inflation numbers are, is abnormal. It hasn't been like that for a long time, 20 plus years. That is not the normal case scenario. In most cases, saving money in savings and CDs is a bad financial move. You're forced to invest your money. Now, if you have an emergency financial challenge, you're willing to risk or forego returns just to have access to capital, that's a different story. But when you're talking about trying to actually get decent earnings and keep your money growing, that window of time is closing. You're going to be forced to evaluate investment opportunities, okay? So what basically is going to happen is you're outside of your emergency savings, outside of the money you're keeping on hand for emergencies, you're going to have to start weighing your options on investing, getting into assets. That's going to be anything from the stock market, real estate. That's going to be anything businesses. Depending on your age bracket and circumstances, annuities are still paying relatively well. which are insurance products. They're paying decent fixed rates as well and indexes on that product and those products. But you are going to have to be mindful of high yield savings accounts, CDs, and damn sure checking accounts. Not a good place to park your money whatsoever in most cases. Gonna have to be mindful. President Trump will likely get his wish on interest rates at some point in time if there's not some massive blow up on the economy or massive blow up on one of his policies coming into place and forcing the Federal Reserve to maintain or increase the federal funds rate. If things stay moderately stable, or his policies are not as negatively impactful as the concerns may be, then eventually the Federal Reserve will feel the pressure to bring rates down. Your deposit rates will go with them. Comment down below and let me know what your plans are with your deposits. Where are you at with your emergency fund? And are you over saving beyond your emergency fund? Are you in high yield savings and CDs, enjoying what has been a risk-off environment where you've been able to get really decent returns, risk-free or low risk on your deposits? Comment down below and let me know how that's been for you and what your pivot or plans are now that that is becoming less attractive and less likely of a place to be. Comment down below. To all my pioneers, welcome back. To my new viewers, welcome in. Like, comment, share the video. Also, you now have the ability to do supers down below and leave a tip, if you will, if you found good value in this video. I'm also letting you know that I have expanded out to social media. I'm on Instagram now personally and for the channel as well. You'll find a handle somewhere on the screen and you'll find links in the description below. I want you to go over there and follow me. I'm starting to slowly but surely grow the community and grow the content that I'm putting out on Instagram and other social media. So check that out as well. Other than that, I want each and every one of you to stay focused, stay in motion. I'll see y'all soon. This is my blueprint for financial empowerment and self-sufficiency. This is my blueprint for optimal health and body mastery. This is my blueprint for mental, physical, and spiritual momentum. This is my blueprint for prosperity.